Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. Today, I have the privilege of introducing two wonderful women and mothers in our community who will be sharing a bit about practicing self-care. Today's webinar is made available through the Rochester Regional Center for Autism Spectrum Disorder here at the Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities, located in the Division of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics at the University of Rochester Medical Center. For those joining us for the first time, just a little background about our Regional Center for Autism. You'll see on the map of New York that we're actually one of 7 across the state, and we serve 12 counties in central New York. And our main goal is to provide community education and technical assistance around autism spectrum disorder. So things like our webinar series, an upcoming family autism conference in June that we'll share a little bit more about at the end of today's webinar, information sheets, things that we hear from the community on needs or areas of interest, and make that a goal of ours to disseminate that to our community and even outside of our region. So just a quick housekeeping tip too before I pass it on to Jackie and Caitlin is, throughout the webinar today, please feel free to use your chat box if you have questions, comments. Also feel free to raise your hand so that we can engage in a meaningful discussion around self-care. And we'll also have an opportunity at the top of your Zoom bar. There's a button called Annotate, and you're able to actually write on the screen too. So we'll give that a try today as well, so that we could engage in some discussion and feedback that way. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Jackie and Caitlin.
Hi, this is Jackie talking. Caitlin and I are both presenting to you today because, like you, we're both parents of kids on the autism spectrum. We both also struggle every day to balance our own needs with those of our children, families, work, and the rest of the world in general. Today, we'll be talking about self-care, what it is, why it's important, and most importantly, how do you do it? We'll be drawing mostly from our own experiences and also from some research on the topic. As parents, I truly believe we can all really learn from each other. So we really want to make this webinar as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you. So there will be lots of opportunities for you to ask questions and share your suggestions and experiences. Don't be shy about raising your hand or typing into the chat box Val introduced you to a minute ago. Okay. So when I started researching this topic, I came across some numbers that really blew my mind. The first one is that mothers of children with socially disruptive behavior spend 3.6 more waking hours per day caring for their child than mothers of a more typical child would. So as parents caring for kids with autism, we really do have less time for ourselves than other parents, 3.6 hours less every day. It's no surprise then that most of us are missing out on some pretty basic things. So the big one on the bottom for me is 91% of mothers raising children with disabilities say they don't have time to do things they enjoy. Think about that. Like, most of us don't get to do anything we enjoy doing. 85% say that we don't have someone to talk to, and 69% of us don't say that we don't get to meet parents in socially satisfying situations. And I can totally relate to that. When my son was little, I tried to meet other new moms on the playground, but while they all were able to sit on the edge of the sandbox and watch their kids dig, I had to leave because my son was kind of exploring the edges of the playground, trying to get away. Okay, but self-care is important. So 2.3 of parents of children with developmental disabilities have significantly elevated stress levels. This number is for parents of children with developmental disabilities in general, but research shows that parenting a child with autism is more stressful than parenting a child with any other disability. And I think one of my friends said something the other day that really sort of gave me a reason for this. She said that we're always required to hold some physical and emotional energy in reserve, just in case something unexpected happens. And as parents of kids with autism, we know there's a lot of unexpected that goes on. I'm telling you about this stress because it's important for us to know that it's negatively impacting us and our kids. Okay, it impacts our physical health. Studies show that parents of children with developmental disabilities have more infections, more headaches, and are at greater risk for high blood pressure and arthritis. Stress also impacts our mental health. Studies show that the vast majority of parents of children with autism experience negative psychological outcomes, including depression and anxiety. And here's a surprising one to me. Our stress has been shown to negatively impact many of our children's outcomes, including the response to early intervention. So it's not just us that the stress is hurting, it's also our children. Which is why self-care is not selfish. We're not just doing it for ourselves. Think about when you're on an airplane, we're always instructed to put our mask on first for oxygen before our children's. We won't be able to take care of our kids if we don't take care of ourselves first. There's also an added benefit. We're all role models for our children. They learn everything from us, including how we take care of ourselves or how we don't take care of ourselves. So think about what your parents want to learn, what you want your kids to learn from you as parents. So self-care is important. Well, what exactly is self-care? It's the decisions and actions we take to enhance all aspects of our health and well-being. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And if you look at it, you can see that that term in the definition I gave you of self-care, all aspects of our health and well-being, includes a wide range of things. From our most basic needs on the bottom of the pyramid, so things like our body's need for food, sleep, and shelter, and our need for safety and security. We're also talking about our psychological needs in the middle of the pyramid, including the need for love and belonging and to feel connected, having friends, family, and community, and also our need for self-esteem, to achieve things, to earn the respect of others. And finally, to that tippy top part, to actually become self-actualized, to become the most we can be. So before we move on, does anyone have any questions or comments? Let me give you a minute. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. Before Caitlin kind of dives into the nuts and bolts of practicing self-care, I want to leave you with this image of a water jug filled with water. Think about it like the water inside is your well-being. Every time we give of ourselves or spend, so to speak, energy or emotion, we're opening that spigot and letting some of the liquid or our well-being out of that jug. Self-care is how we refill that jug or replenish our well-being. Think about if we only keep giving of ourselves, the jug empties quickly and we're no good for anybody. We don't have anything left to give. So self-care really is that, how do we keep this jug full so we can keep doing what we need to do for our children? So I'm going to pass you off to Caitlin to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Hi, I'm Caitlin LeGros, another autism parent and friend of Jackie now. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is probably the most tricky for all of us, which is how can I do self-care? And I think Jackie and I want to start this with a big disclaimer, because I think that there's a common misconception that a bubble bath is going to help cure the stress of caring for someone with autism, and that is not at all what our goal is here today. Our goal is to help you come up with some activities that are restorative and meaningful and perhaps outside of your caregiving responsibilities. And of course, we couldn't start that without first looking at this pyramid, because it's not just self-care that we're talking about today. It's the things that can help you get to self-care. First of all, you're not going to stay awake in that bubble bath if you have not slept or eaten or had some physical activity during that time. So just a quick question about health. I think we've all been there when we've had newborns. And if you remember the newborn stage, or hopefully don't, there was a time when you could not sleep. And my job is actually a midwife, so I deliver babies. And one of the things I see in new parents is this mental deterioration as sleep has not happened. And that's not a choice. It's not a personality issue. It's not a personal failure. It is a biological fact that if you don't have sleep for 36 plus hours, you will go insane. And as somebody who has stayed up that long before in my professional and personal life, I don't recommend it. And I also agree with those findings. So sometimes if you feel like you're ready to take a step towards self-care, just look back on this pyramid and think, have I filled in my bottom parts? Am I going to be able to enjoy this experience if I'm really hungry or I'm too tired to stay awake at the concert, which has happened to me? Or, do I really need to get out of this house instead of sitting here reading a book all day? Or do I need to do a fun shopping trip instead of, going to meditate? And that's what the crux of this is about, is it's going to be individualized and there's not one answer for everybody. So just keep that in mind. I think the hardest one to do is actually move, because it's really easy to not have that peace in your life. Discounting the part where our kids have autism and run away quite a bit. But the moving voluntarily that you can do is really hard, because it changes a couple of things for you. It's a physical movement, so you're actually getting some exercise in your body, and often it's a setting change too. You're getting outside, you're going to the gym, you're seeing people that are not the people you usually see every day, so that's a nice variety for your brain. And the most important one, I think, is the mindset change that we really discount. And that's easy to say, I'm not ready for self-care today because I need to do these other things that are more important. But having signed up to meet someone at the gym or to do a class, I think I've often found that after the class, I'm A, never sad that I went to the gym, and B, I'll find that I'm less distracted or worried by that problem than when I came in. So there's a lot of science behind that too, that can really help you. So moving up the pyramid slightly, of course, you could never go take that bubble bath if somebody wasn't watching your kid. So that's why we're talking about support, which is just slightly above sleep in terms of what you need. You can't do self-care without someone watching the kids. Sometimes you need someone to talk to, and sometimes you need someone to ease the burden of the problem that is overwhelming your life during that day. And that's maybe more important than self-care. Those people can be therapists, teachers, social support like family and friends. And I just want to take a minute to say that not all of us have all of these things right now, or will not have, and that is okay too. Some of us don't have access to family that's right next to us, and those people, myself included, you need to build your own support network of whoever you find helpful and a good addition to your support network. It could be neighbors, other parents. It could be a therapist, which I personally have seen and recommend because this can be quite an adventure. Religious leaders, or it could be an online group. I personally belong to the Autism Up Parents group, which has been really helpful for stress relieving and ideas and sometimes just venting. You just need people who get it, get your situation, and can actually help with that. I don't need to tell you a story of somebody saying an unhelpful remark, because we've all been there. You need people that are actually going to help you with those situations. And I hope that you can find those things. And now the hardest part of this pyramid, which is just for you time. You have to think about what makes you a person. And tough subjects as you have the right to be yourself, which is hard to remember sometimes when you're so wrapped up in the needs of someone else for those 2.5 extra hours per day per child. But keep in mind that just being you also makes you an excellent role model for the other people in your family, so that they can see how it is to deal with these things and to take on the challenge in a healthy way, not always, but hopefully the majority of the time, and come up with a good answer that works for everybody. Okay. And I just want to end with saying that it's okay for this to be hard, because it is really hard. That's the top of the pyramid. You have to master the other two, health and support, first. And very infrequently, but more than we probably should, we need to get to the top, which is just time for you. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, just some tips that both Jackie and I and the research has found to be really helpful in doing self-care. So this is some of the logistics and framework that we can kind of just slightly reframe how you're thinking about self-care at this point. So I think we can all go back to a time when we weren't doing self-care. I'll tell you just one brief story about me. I was working 60 hours a week. I had just had a new baby, and my partner was working nights 100 hours a week for a month. And my other kid was losing control and really starting to come into his autism and ADHD. So this was the worst time in my life. But there was no time for myself, and without any self-care, which I don't really blame myself, that was a pretty bad situation, but without any help or assistance or any of those things on the pyramid, we both totally burnt out. At different times, we had to take 2 weeks off of work. We had mental breakdowns. It was really disastrous for our family, financially too. We had to fly people in so that we could try to recover. And 2 weeks is not enough time to recover from something really this intense. I mean, it's taken me years to deal with that time. So I just want to say, if you have a choice to do self-care, please do, because I've been to the other side and I do not recommend it at all. Okay, so just some tips here. Just like with our kids, it's really great to schedule activities and to prepare. You're going to need to set aside some time for self-care if you need, and you'll see on the next slides that it does not have to be hours or days. It could be seconds or minutes. And set up respite. And then once you're done with that, schedule another one. Quick story about this is we often hire our babysitters or our respite workers to come on a regular basis. And there has been at least like 3 or 4 times when we don't actually want to go out. We're really tired, but we've already set that up. So we then go ahead and do it. And almost the majority of the time we feel like, oh, I'm really glad we did that because I wasn't in the space to do self-care, but my previous self had remembered that this was helpful and set it up. And then it worked really well. Number 2, guilt-free. Guilt is the worst emotion because it doesn't give anything back to you. It just sucks it all out and there's no way to get around it. So I'll just say that this is very draining and it gets easier with practice to get away from the guilt because that's just not helpful. You need to fill yourself up to give more. That's the end. So we're going to move on. 3, ask for and accept help, which is clearly the hardest parenting lesson I've ever learned. Because you have to A, admit that you're not doing well, and then B, accept that someone may not do and probably won't do as good a job as you could do, and that's really hard to see. But that's also okay. This is another one that gets easier with practice, and I guarantee you'll be okay. 4 is take regular breaks. You all know this. Find your tribe, which we talked about before in your support. And these 6, 7, and 8 really all come together. This is about how precious your time is. Prioritize your time. You can choose the things that you want to do most of the time. It's okay to say no to extra responsibilities, and it's okay to cancel things that you've already said you would do or appointments. For example, 2 weeks ago, my son was having a whole week of horrible behaviors. I said, this isn't going to work. I canceled everything that I didn't have to do that week. And I just went to bed early. And that really helped too, because I knew that that was going to be a bad week. And it really made things a lot different. And the last one is, of course, the best piece of advice I can ever give you is that these small things add up and it's a process. Just a quick story here. The first time that you do self-care, please don't expect that it's going to go great and you're going to feel wonderful. I did one of those body-mind float tanks, which is kind of a sensory deprivation experience, which some of our kids might like. But I found this to be horrible because I was trapped in a pool for an hour and I just wanted to go finish my to-do list. So it's okay to say that this self-care isn't working for you, and it's okay for it to be a little bit rocky at first. That is just the product of a mind that's really efficient at doing different things and multitasking, and it's weird not to do that after a while. So let's move on with our first activity. And this is about remembering what things you like to do. So there was a time when I literally forgot what I liked to do as an adult because things were so intense, and I had to make a list on a Post-it note and put it on the fridge to remember that I like to listen to music or read books because it was so stressful. When I had a free moment, I just automatically went into cleaning the house or looking at the IEP or reading that parenting book. And none of those were helping me become resilient. They were just draining more of my energy. So it might be easier to get those chores done, but that's really kind of a fear response instead of a relaxing response, which is what we'd like to do. So now we're going to do our first activity. And this is where I'd like for you people out there in the internets to kind of write down what self-care looks like for you now. It could be one thing. It could be, I don't know. It could be trying to think back to one of the activities that you like to do at some point so we can come up with something. Mm-hmm. And as an incentive, we actually have a prize for somebody at the end of this webinar. If you're able to write down a couple things, we have a wonderful parenting book on mindfulness and autism that we'd love to give away to someone. So if you can go up to the top of your screen and you're going to look for the annotate button, which will help you write down what you do for self-care.
So folks, feel free to use that annotate button and write right on the screen, or use your chat box to share that with us. Or feel free to keep even your own list if you're not comfortable sharing. But this is a great way to share ideas with other participants as well. So we really encourage your sharing of this.
Yeah, Caitlin and I are hoping we'll learn some new things from you also.
All right. Jackie, perhaps you want to share one self-care thing that you do while we're everyone's brainstorming.
I've been thinking a lot about this lately. My husband keeps trying to get me to write a list of things I enjoy doing, and I'm having a very hard time with it. One of the things I do most days is I read before I go to bed. And it's never anything serious or about, we were just talking about, it's never a parenting book. It could be anything I want to read. And some days it really is just, the Apple News feed and catching up on all the, guilty pleasures. But, often it's, books.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple responses. I think someone tried to write taking a walk with the dog. So walking, painting, swimming, meditation, music, concerts. Well, that is excellent because those are all wonderful self-care activities. They can be big or small, and they don't have to be something that takes a lot of time. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, and thank you so much for your participation. I think, Julie, you're the one that responded that I can see, so I think you're going to be getting a book. All right. So let's move on to the next slide, which is just some general categories. There's infinite things that you could do for self-care. I tried to break them down into a slide so we could kind of get an idea of what they might be. The first one is pretty easy, things you literally do with your body. You need to have friends sometimes. I'm sure we've all had that experience where you're talking to a friend and working through a problem, or weren't aware you had a problem until you started to kind of discuss it with somebody. Respite and taking breaks. I remember when I had just had a newborn baby, my parents kicked me out of the house to go get a manicure. And I didn't realize the amount of stress I had on me until I got in the car and felt 1,000 pounds lift off my chest. So sometimes you don't know what's going on with yourself, and you can't check in because you don't have that break. So highly recommend those. Exercise, also an excellent thing you can do with your body. I currently have a problem playing tennis because I hit the ball too hard because I have an anger problem. So that's good to know. I wouldn't have known that until I had gone out and see that my body really needed some tactile proprioceptive activities to burn off what was going on inside. Creativity and nature are all wonderful. Those can really change the space that you're physically and emotionally in. And those are great activities too. The mind is very interesting because those are the ones where we have the most amount of evidence that journaling, meditation, especially mindfulness, can be very, very helpful in changing your perspective and how you deal with stress. There is nothing that I can do today or anyone else to change what's going on with your situation with your child or yourself or stress at home in general. But there are ways that you can change how you look at it that can blow your mind away. Another thing that will change that too is thinking about things in a positive way. We know that our brains really stick to those negative thoughts and end up in negative ruts and talking to yourself in a negative way, but you can actually change the way that your brain works by switching it around to the positive, thinking about the things you're grateful for in your life, focusing on the positives. I remember one time when I was in the Peace Corps, there were, out of 100 things, 99 were really the worst I'd ever dealt with my whole life, but one of them was good. And I just said, to get through 2 years, I need to focus on the one that's positive, because I'll drown in all the negative things. And I think that you have a choice in how you deal with what's going on in your life, even if that's really hard to do sometimes. Okay, so on to our self-care menu, which Jackie and I really want to break this down into something that you can use right now. You can screenshot this, you can keep it on your phone, you can print it out, put it on your fridge, because no matter what's going on with you in your life, I know that you have seconds to do something. You have time after putting your kid in the car to walk around to your driver's seat. That's a full 3 seconds. I know because I have counted. And you can take a deep breath. You can yell at your kids while they're not there. You can do what you need to do to just take it down another level. Something that I'm not brave enough to do is turn off my phone. I'm going to work on that. But that's another way to cut off the stream of potentially stressful things and interruptions. A moment of silence, that can be really excellent too. Sometimes we think our best thoughts when there's just a negative space there. Congratulate yourself on something small. This is amazing. One of the things that my husband and I do that really help us in parenting is when little small things go well, we always try to say, hey, great job there. I like how you did that. Or that went really well. We're doing okay. Because those moments of recognition can change how your brain perceives what's going on. Savor the moment when something good happens. This is great. If your kid reads for the first time, you can stretch that out for hours if you really want to think about, oh, that moment was so great. I remember he read Band-Aid for the first time last week, and I was so happy the whole day because he clearly knew how to read those letters. And that's something we've been working on for years. So not only can you go back in the past and worry about something, you can also stretch out a really good moment. And something as simple as doing a second thing that you like to do. Putting on your perfume is obviously kind of a superficial one that I chose, but it could be anything that you like to do. Wear a favorite sweater, something physical to just bring you back to a pleasurable moment. Then you can get to minutes, which almost all of us have. Burning a candle, that depends on your kid, but usually you can do that. Have a cup of tea or coffee, that can be great because once you prepare it, you can bring it with you, so you can bring your comfort with you. This is my favorite one, is take 10 deep breaths. I've done this for about 5 years, and there's not a single time after breath 10 that I don't feel better than I did at breath 1. So that is a really easy one to do. Also very portable. You can do that while you're driving or kids are screaming or you're in a CSE meeting, which I will be this week. You can do those 10 deep breaths. A quick meditation or prayer is easy to do. Remember that music that you like to do. Stretching can be helpful too. Pulls you back into your body, just like my son sometimes loses control of his body. Stretching can kind of bring him back into there. And that's what I like to do too. Touching base with somebody that you love can be helpful, or a friend. Giving a compliment, that's a really powerful experience for your brain. You're thinking outside of yourself, looking elsewhere, and able to give that positive feedback back. That actually helps you become more positive too. Write a thank you note. I know I need to write 1,000 of these. Buy some flowers, go outside, which of course is hard in Rochester. So if that's a positive thing, go ahead and do that. This one's a little bit more challenging. Create a relaxing routine. I would say that one of the things that's been most helpful for me over the last couple of years is putting myself to bed in a way that really helps process so that I'm not thinking about all of that stuff all night. So I don't know if you're a morning person or an evening, or perhaps before the kids come home for school, if you can find just a couple minutes to have a routine that brings you back down to earth, that can be helpful. Doing something creative is great, going for a walk, mini pampering sessions, bubble baths. I just threw that in there because we can't all do that, but that's a goal. Okay, unplug from technology or social media. Food can be helpful, either making it or not making it, equally powerful. Writing down things you're thankful for. And I just happened to pick up a buckwheat neck pillow the other day, and the pressure and the heat was really much more bang for my buck than I thought it would be. So I threw that in there. If you have hours, I don't know if you're a clean person, you can declutter. I'm not sure about, but watch your favorite movie again, read a book, take a nap, get a massage, moving your body, having a date night with your partner or friends, and having an intense workout session. I don't know if you've ever sweated so hard you can't think about anything else, but that is a really cleansing experience. And I recommend that too. These are some of our longer self-care projects: trying a new hobby or restarting an old one, trying something new, perhaps going to therapy, which has been very, very helpful for me, at least personally, dealing with the variety of stressors going on. And of course, mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness and meditation can be in any of these categories though, seconds, minutes, hours, or longer. I would say that's more of something to do throughout your whole life. Okay, so now we're going to get to the brainstorming. Now that we've kind of gone over things, I'd love to hear just 1, 2, maybe even 3 things that you've thought of during this presentation that you can make a promise to yourself that you'd like to try over the next day or week or month to try to bring self-care back into your life. So we'll just take a minute here. If you can use that annotate button again or write in the chat, that would be great.
Or even just write for yourself. And it doesn't have to be something we mentioned. I know when we were doing this, we kept brainstorming and one thing would lead to another thing. So anything you share would be awesome.
Great. Well, hopefully we're all considering some self-care goals for the future. And this kind of concludes what we're looking for in terms of the content that we're going to present to you. Next, we have some resources for the community, hopefully things you're already aware of, but things that have helped Jackie and myself get those resources and support that allow us to get the self-care that we need. Okay, and then the next one is some apps that we recommend. There are some really great mindfulness apps that can break down the really intense experience of mindfulness and meditation into small bites that are much more palatable. So the Calm app is one that I use. They have stories that they'll tell you to help calm your mind. There are some guided meditations that are very helpful. There's some sleep unstressors. And there's actually a circle where it helps you breathe in and out, over and out. And that can be really helpful. Jackie?
I actually use Stop, Breathe, Think. I like it because it actually, you can kind of pick a category and an amount of time. It'll give you a menu. So you can do like a 2 or 3 minute meditation, which I will often do when I'm in the office. If I'm stressed out, you can kind of walk around for a couple of minutes and listen to it.
And of course, there's many gratitude apps out there. There's one that I particularly like where it's not something you write down, you just put pictures in it. So you can look back over all the pictures that make you feel grateful about. So they're all good memories. Okay, we have our references here in case you're interested. Of course, the Rochester Regional Center for Autism Spectrum Disorders contact. And of course, we're going to give our book here to Julie Buick, I think.
Yeah. So Julie, what we'll do is let's touch base following the webinar and we'll make sure to mail you a copy of this book. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Okay.
And before we wrap up, just wanted to give a shout out for our upcoming Skirball Family Autism Conference. This will be held on Saturday, June 9th at the Strong Museum of Play from 8 to noon. And then from noon to 1, actually, we'll have a make and take visual supports workshop available. So this conference is designed for families. We're so grateful to have partnered with many parents, self-advocates, and other community members in Rochester to pick a nice lineup of sessions in our keynote on inclusive community experiences, topics on transition, genetic considerations in ASD, self-care. So we are happy to bring this to Rochester again for its 2nd year. Free to attend includes admission to the Strong Museum of Play, as well as breakfast and lunch vouchers. So we hope to see you there. Registration is available now on our website in both English and Spanish, so feel free to spread the word. I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us today, and a huge thank you to our presenters, Jackie and Caitlin, for this treat of a presentation to start getting us thinking of perhaps some new ideas of ways that we can incorporate self-care into our everyday lives. And following today's webinar, all attendees will receive a link to a satisfaction survey. We would love your feedback, as well as any other ideas that you'd like to see presented in webinars. That's very important. And then everybody will also receive a copy of the PowerPoint, so you have these resources available, as well as our recording of today's presentation as well. So, and that will all be posted on our website. So before we wrap up, feel free to use your chat box or raise your hand if you have any questions or comments about today's presentation. And with that, we hope everybody enjoys the rest of their afternoon. All right, folks, well, feel free to contact us at the Regional Center for ASD if anything following today's webinar, any questions, comments, if you'd like to connect with our presenters. And then Julie will be in touch so that we can get you your book. Thank you so much, everyone.